we're going to keep the topic on this relationship between nonprofit and profits, and I think there couldn't be a better person to sort of take the ball and run with it, literally, than Jeff Power. He's the Director, U.S. Partner Development Team of Global Hope Network International. He and his team mobilize people and resources from the U.S. that serve, support, and accelerate the worldwide projects of Global Hope Network International. He's passionate about serving the world's poorest and feels GHNI gives him some great tangible ways to do that. So it's with my great pleasure and our great pleasure to introduce Jeff Power.
I'm going to start from just a slightly different place when we talk about cause marketing in the digital space. It's a little weird to me to be talking about this because I'm like, probably out of all of you in the room, I'm like the complete newcomer to everything in the digital space. I'm a complete newcomer to social media. I was a pastor of just a little suburban church for 1 million years, and I took this job with this organization. 5 years ago, our church loved to do things very tangibly for poverty. So we worked with the Center for Homeless Teens in Denver. We went across the border, built houses for people in the Tijuana area. And we're trying to figure out, okay, we're a little suburban church, a couple hundred people. We love to be hands-on. How can you be hands-on where the worst poverty is? Africa, Middle East, Asia, that part of the world, so far away. So I got connected up with, through some relationships, with the president of the organization I work with now, Global Hope Network, out of Geneva, Switzerland. And he invited me to go with him, with my pastor hat on, to Kenya and to Ethiopia in 2007. And you know, I didn't know what to expect. I've always called myself kind of the suburban white kid who's never traveled. And so I go to Africa and I thought, am I going to die? You know, what's going to happen? Am I going to catch some disease? I'll be out and I'm going to get a mosquito bite. And, you know, it's just flying into the Nairobi airport, seeing guys with M16 rifles guarding. You know, I feel like I'm in a different world. And so I went with him and a couple other folks and met somebody he was meeting in Kenya to potentially hire, and we went out to villages. Global Hope Network works with the poorest villages of the world in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. And something happened to me. Have any of you ever been in like one of those situations where you can't exactly put words to what's going on, but you just get so choked with emotion, you know something's happening in your life, and it's not something you planned, and it's not a script you wrote. You know you're being carried along by something so invisible and so much bigger than you are. I was outside of Nairobi, and I borrowed the president's sat phone, and I made a call home to Mary, my wife, and she goes, "How's it going?" And I just started crying. I wasn't crying because I was dying from a disease. I just teared up because I thought, I said, I can't explain to you what's going on, honey. My heart is so drawn to this. And it wasn't even drawn like, oh, I see the worst poverty in the world, ooh, and it's icky, awful. It wasn't even that kind of drawn. It was this feeling of kind of being at home. You know what I mean? Like you've been there too. Like you're in a situation, you go, I was made for this. And so we were sitting with elders of different villages, of different tribes, and translators in their village and listening to their problems. And my background was engineering and architecture, and before I went into pastoral ministry. And my brain was just working on solutions. And I started thinking that I could help these folks. So I came home, and within 7 months, I quit my job as pastor of the church and signed on with this outfit. Now here's where the social media part comes in. My son, because people at my phase of life, you learn this stuff through your kids. My son goes, "Dad, you ought to start a thing called a blog." Now, at the time, I thought that was the dumbest word in the world. Like, what is a blog? And so he showed me what a blog was, and I thought, oh, okay. So I played around with it and thought, okay, I'll put some stories as I travel on a blog. And then he says, there's this new thing that's kind of come along that you ought to check out. It might be good for your new job. It's called Twitter. So he goes, you got to look at it. So I go on twitter.com and I look at it, and I'm going, this is the stupidest thing I have ever seen. I'm eating my Cheerios, I'm picking my nose, I'm taking the dog for a walk. I mean, I just said, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to do this. I don't see the advantage in doing it. Well, again, it's one of these sort of, I call it a divine thing. A couple weeks later, I was on a flight to India to help some of our villages there. And I talked to this guy sitting next to me who's obviously got some Indian descent in him, and his son, young 10-year-old son's there with him. And you get to talking about, what do you do? And I was explaining about my work, and he goes, oh, he says, I'm on the board of directors for this new thing out there you might consider using. It's called Twitter. So I'm sitting next to a board member for Twitter, and I go, okay, you got to explain something to me because it just looks really dumb. And he said, well, a lot of people do use it that way, but he went on to explain it's like, you know, a huge meeting hall where if you like to meet people, it's a great way to meet people and truly converse on topics of common interest. And for me, the light went on at that point. I thought, oh, it's about relationships, because I like those. And so I came home and started on Twitter and started to get a following on Twitter. We did a 24-hour campaign where I met AJ and Melissa. We raised $10,000 for a boy who had lost both his arms in Ethiopia to actually have a store built for him where he could sell stuff and become a sustainable. He was an AIDS orphan, and we wanted to help him become sustainable. And AJ donated the last couple $100 to put us over the $10,000 mark. And then Reuters news agency did an article. They listed me as the #2 humanitarian in the world on Twitter, and it just kind of accelerated from there. So everything I'm going to share is on the really small end of how we're learning lessons, and mostly the things I'm learning is because AJ and Melissa have been teaching me as we've gone along, about how at the smallest level to use social media to create relationships between the poorest villages of the world and people here. Now, I'm going to point out something because I come from the nonprofit. I think you could probably use it, those of you who are in the for-profit world. A key distinction between the for-profit world and the not-for-profit world. So I'll ask you a question. In the for-profit world, who is the main contributor? Meaning, who puts money into the equation? Right. My exact words, look at you. You got to write this. Yeah, the client or customer puts money into the scenario. Who's the primary beneficiary of this transaction? No. The client and the customer, right? They put money in because they benefit. So I call that high feedback. In other words, in the for-profit world, the main thing you need to do is do a good enough product and a good enough service that satisfies your client or customer so they feel this was worthwhile to me. It's a very high feedback loop. Now, in the non-for-profit, the person who contributes money and the primary beneficiary are very separate people. And sometimes the distance between the contributor and the beneficiary is extreme, and sometimes there are many, many obstacles. So for instance, what are some obstacles in a typical nonprofit scenario that actually cause a separation between the contributor and the beneficiary? Name some. Geography, language, culture, worldview gap, economics, possibilities. Yeah, they're huge, aren't they? Get this, sometimes the nonprofit itself is one of the biggest obstacles between the contributor and the beneficiary. Because our old model in the nonprofit world was, we the nonprofit went out to you as an individual, your Rotary Club, your church, your school. We told you about the work we do. We told you about that work by telling you stories about the beneficiaries, but we wanted you to give us money so we could go do our work with the beneficiaries. Where did we place ourselves by taking that approach? Right between the contributor and the beneficiary. What we're trying to do, AJ and Melissa and I, we are trying to use the tools that exist now, which didn't even exist when we first started talking. Oops, how do I bring that back? Oh, there we go. There's very low feedback. We're trying to use the tools to make all the obstacles as transparent as possible. Now, you can't eliminate them all, right? Like in our organization, one of the main obstacles is 8 to 10 to 12,000 miles and completely different cultures and completely different economics. We want to use the tools to facilitate as direct a relationship as possible between the person putting money into the equation and the person benefiting from the equation. Now, one distinction we have made internally to focus on that, let me get to that in a minute. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we do. We help the poorest villages of the world transform themselves, and we work in the area where 1 billion people live on $1 a day or less. And 85% of them are rural. So it's the rural poor. We focus on the most despised tribes or groups, even within their own country. Like, for instance, we work with the Tibetan people in China. We work with the Fur people in Western Sudan. That's where we get the name Darfur. Dar means land of the fur. How many people read Kite Runner or saw the movie? So you know about the Hazara race, the Hazara tribe in Afghanistan. We began in Afghanistan and worked with them. The Santal people in India. AJ and Melissa came with me back in February with our work with tribes in northern Kenya and southern Ethiopia, the Borana tribe. And what we do is something that's kind of boring. We work with that village in a coaching method for 3 to 5 years, and we help them form committees and help them do the small, low-cost projects to become completely sustainable in all 5 of those areas. We call it transformational community development. So this end of the spectrum is disaster relief, which makes the news and causes a buzz. We work at this end of the spectrum, which is 3 to 5 years working with a village, coaching them, hiring local staff. And the only way we can get money to what we do, we cannot count on the news. We cannot get the buzz and the hit. We have to form that relationship between the person putting money in and the person receiving the benefit. Now, what I was going to say is golly, I keep pushing the wrong button. We make a distinction in our organization at eliminating the word donor. There's a huge difference between a donor and a partner. When I say the word donor, what comes into your mind? What's that? One time? Organs? Money. Yeah, it's mostly this, isn't it? You're a wallet. If you're a donor, you're primarily a wallet to the organization. We need your money. We use the term internally partner because partnership has a completely different connotation, right? And if you say the word and you act on the word, what are some of the distinctions? When you're a partner, when you truly feel like a partner in something, like in a marriage, in a business, in a sporting event, in some venture, what is true of partnership? Ownership. Vested interest, you feel heard. You have mutual collaboration, dedication. I'm going to sum it up with 3 that we use internally. You feel close, right? Like you feel like you're there with it somehow. You feel connected to it, and you feel like you're contributing or collaborating with it. Now, what I'm going to share for the remainder of the time here is ways we are trying to take steps as an organization to narrow that gap between our partners and the people who are benefiting from it. And I'm going to tell you, just by showing you a couple things from 3 different villages in central Kenya where we started this, we created this whole program we're calling Adopt a Village, where the idea is instead of giving money to Global Hope Network, we want to give a business or a church or a Rotary Club or a synagogue or a school a specific village, because our method is so low cost. We want to give them a specific village that they stick with for 3 to 5 years, and they get to know their village. And so we want to facilitate that sense of being close and being connected and contributing. I am fine if when they talk to their friends about their involvement with us, and somebody goes, oh, you're helping out a village? That's really cool. Like, what organization are you doing that with? If they say, I can't remember the name of the organization, but I can tell you the name of my village. If that's their response, they can tell you stories about their village. We've done our job. We've become invisible. We've gotten out of the way so people can relate to their village. I was going to show you. So that gal on the right, her name is Habiba Mengesha. She is our director of coaching several villages in central Kenya that I'm going to tell you about. First one I'm going to tell you about is a village called Gambela. We brought some partners. The way we achieve closeness is we take trips. We do everything we can to allow people to fly and go and hang out in their village for a week and work on some project. Gambela is down on the drought-ridden plains north of Mount Kenya in central Kenya. And most of the year it's very dry. They're lucky if they even get one meal a day. And we're trying to teach the village on the food sector about efficient use of water through drip irrigation. How many of you live in dry climates where you have like drip irrigation for your bushes? Or okay, I live in Colorado, so we've even got it in Colorado. Drip irrigation is just this brilliant thing invented about 15 years ago by an Israeli guy. You just let the water go into pipes that have little holes in it, and the water just drips out real slowly right next to the plants and just sits there with a tiny little drip by drip all day long, and it's a very efficient. You can grow food with about 1/20th the amount of water that it normally takes. So we've got a couple partners from a business in Michigan and a church in the Denver area, and they put their money in and the village put their money in, and they're laying out these drip irrigation lines, and we've got a tank up there. This was in February of 2009. Normally at this time of year in February, they're starving. So we helped them lay out the drip irrigation. We did it on about 1.5 acres. And then what we always do at the end of these trips is we have a little dedication ceremony. So we dedicated this acre of drip irrigation to the village. We had a ceremony in the morning. The UN came out. The local Kenyan government officials came out. And it was like, you know, we want this to bless your village and bless your children, that you would end up having enough food now for your future. So that was in February. While we had that little ceremony, the women of the village started spontaneously singing and making up a thank you song, which I couldn't tell you what the words are to it, but I took my little cheapo camera and turned it on video, and I caught it here. If you can look, you can see all of us around the circle holding up our cameras doing the same thing, like, oh my gosh, this is like National Geographic. So that was February, completely dry, dusty soil. So they planted right after we left. They grew the food through March and into April, and this is what they got at the end of April. Boom. On that 1.5 acres of land, that village is now growing 1.5 metric tons every growing season. Then they have 3 growing seasons a year. There are produce companies now that drive their trucks from Nairobi up to our village and our group of villages, buying produce from the village because there's so much extra produce to take back down to Nairobi and obviously sell for a profit in the markets down there. So on one of our recent trips where we took, last summer when we took partners, we built a storehouse. So there's the acre right behind them. And we worked with the village and built a storehouse that they can put all the food into their storehouse, and now the trucks can drive up, and it's a pretty cool deal. So that's one way we allow partners to get close, is go, have your hands on, just be part of the village. We want people to be connected who can't go to the village. And this is where we're starting to use satellite technology and video hookups. I bought a satellite uplink antenna that can get Inmarsat is a company that has 4 satellites that are around the globe purely for broadband speed internet from anywhere on the planet. So I set this thing up, and we can be out in one of the most rural villages of the world. I've done it in India, I've done it from Pakistan, I've done it from Kenya, I've done it from Ethiopia, so on. And so we will set this thing up to have conversations by video over my laptop, which is right back there, back to a partner that is helping to sponsor that village, whether it's a church or a business or whatever. So here we're with the village of Bula Sedima, and there is Melissa eating. What were you eating there? This is goat, right? Yeah, it's goat meat. So the village usually slaughters a goat and cooks it all up, and so Melissa's like, oh, this is a great recipe. I'm going to have this at home. So we're with the village, and we told them, we've explained to that village since the very beginning that the reason we're able to work with them is because they have 3 partners. So one church and 2 different businesses are the 3 partners for that village. So we told them, okay, tomorrow morning, we need you to get up before the sun comes up, and we all were going to meet in a field. And we're going to let you talk to your partners back in the United States by video. So we kind of one by one. We drove out. We got up, what, at 4 in the morning. And went out and got to the village, and we got flashlights, and we're trying to set up the satellite antenna and plug in my laptop and all this. And just as the sun came up over the horizon and now there was enough light to be able to see, we started the first of 3 15-minute calls to those 3 partners. I'll show you a little video I got, and AJ was getting video at the same time. We're calling the owners of that, Deerfield Farms is a big ag business in central Ohio. So we're calling the owner of them, and Habiba's husband, Wubshet, is doing the translating. So this is a little bit how those calls look.
So that's what, with Jeff or with Dido, you can stand with us and help us.
Kasifu,
and you have heard the problem we are facing in Pulesh Dima, what we have just told you about water intake. The government does not allow them to use any water because they need to charge them. You have had our problems.
These are all the elders of the village who came out.
And he's saying we have a great hope, you people, by standing with us, and we can come out of all these problems. Yeah, he's saying, I agree with you. Thank you. Thank us.
So imagine you're on the other end of that, and now you are a small business that said, we want part of what we do to help the worst poverty in the world. And twice a year, you get to gather the employees of your business. One time I was in India, and they had one of their employees with me of a company in Honolulu. And they were up on the 12th floor of their office building in downtown Honolulu, and Jason had about 100 villagers behind him in India. And they had a conversation from a conference room in downtown Honolulu to a rural village in northeast India. It's just incredible. You feel so connected. That would not have been possible, what, 6 years ago? 5, 6 years ago. Would have never happened. So, Lisa, we got to have like go-to-meeting calls all over the planet now, from villages back to, I mean, it's just going to be, it's going to be killer. One last thing. We're trying to invent ways that people can really contribute using social media. And one of our dreams early on, when AJ and I first met on the phone, I shared my idea of what I want through social media for a single mom with her laptop and 2 little kids who doesn't have 2 nickels to rub together to still be able to sponsor a village and get to know that village from her laptop. That was 2 years ago. And we clicked on that idea, and we're wondering, how in the world could you end up doing that? Well, we finally figured out a way to pull this off and to test it. I formed a relationship with a gal who's, her name is Jennifer there. Jennifer is a huge mom blogger. She has, what, 1/3 of a million uniques a month, I think, on her mom blog. It's called McMama.com. And she had a heart for Africa, and a mutual friend introduced us. And so I shared the idea with her. I said, what if you talk to your readers about the idea of adopting a village as a group of readers? And that we created a way on the web where they could click and join this village. We call it now an extended village. They could join the extended village. All we need is 100 people at $12 a month. That funds our program in a village. Our program is about $15,000 a year for 3 to 5 years. She loved the idea. We were quaking in our boots. We were like, oh my gosh. Now that she said yes, we're like in trouble because we have to try it. So she came with me in February. AJ and Melissa came with me. So we had some other volunteers in Kenya in February because we're just getting started in this other village called Ola Nagele. So AJ, Melissa, and their team created a site specifically for the village. So it's a little mini blog. You can even go to it now if you want. It's olanagele.ghni.org. And if you can see on here, oh, and we gave a smartphone to a local kid. He's like 21 or 22 years old. And he takes pictures of his village with his smartphone and puts broken English captions under the picture and uploads them to this Tumblr blog. Now, so he's showing pictures of his village, and what we created over here is a button that says Join Ola Nagele Village, and we call it Extended Village. So Jennifer came with us, and she spent the first 2 days just taking pictures of the village, blogging about it, telling people that on the 3rd day she was going to release the link to tell them where to go to learn more about the village and to join the extended village. So at the end of the 3rd day, we are back at the guest house where we're all staying. So in Kenya, it's 9:10 p.m. And she's sitting there with her laptop open. I'm over here on my laptop watching our PayPal, and AJ and Melissa have their laptops open. And at 9:10 p.m., which is about lunchtime here in the U.S., she publishes her blog post with the link in it, and we just sit there with like bated breath going, are we going to look like absolute idiots here and nobody's going to join? And we'll be like, oh, boy, that looked bad. So one by one, like, boom, the first person clicked and came in, and then boom, next person clicked, and then boom, and then clicks started coming in. We had this thing where I had watching the PayPal, and I would write down on a piece of paper the person's first name and last initial. So I'd write 1 or 2 or 3 down. I would turn it to Jennifer. She would add them into her blog post, and then real quickly she'd throw the piece of paper back at me, and I would add more names on it and then throw it back to her. We just kept going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth like this. And at 12:20 p.m., 3 hours and 10 minutes, the 100th person signed up to adopt the village, and then we took that button and changed it to say this village is full. We raised $15,000 a year for a 3 to 5 year commitment in 3 hours and 10 minutes. And now all the people around the country that read Jennifer's blog that have supported this village, they can see on there, and about every week, Abdi is posting pictures of what's going on in the village in ways that Global Hope Network and the staff, Habiba and Woodshed, are helping that village. We then started a Facebook group, and everybody who sponsored the village would be allowed into the Facebook group, and that's where all the people in the Facebook group can talk to each other. And guess what? Abdi is part of the Facebook group from Kenya, and Abdi will answer questions that people ask him in the Facebook group about his village and the things going on there. So here's my question to you. In the for-profit world, it's the same thing, I really believe. I think that to do even for-profit well, it's the same principles. You can either treat people in your for-profit as simply consumers, and so all you do is give them something to consume, or you can also treat people as if you truly want them to be close and connected and contributing to your company. The question I'll pose back to you is we have to work harder to do that in the nonprofit, so it forces us to be a little more creative and a little more out there. But what if you did it? What if in your for-profit world you said, I want everybody I'm engaged with, I want all of them to feel very close and very connected and very much a contributor to my little business, whether it's just me or our small team or a huge corporation. I wonder how that could change the whole world and bridge a lot of gaps. There's, real quick, my contact info if you want to stay in touch. My Twitter, my Facebook, my blog. And because we're all self-supporting in the organization I work with, I'm coming out with my own coffee soon because I'm in Ethiopia 2 times a year, and I'm in the best coffee places on the planet, so I'm now bringing it back. So you can watch in the next 4 weeks. I'm going to launch my coffee site, pangeocoffee.com. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much.